before the drama, before the silence, and long before the Wild Wild West became a cult classic, Ross Martin was already quietly building a reputation as one of the most versatile performers on television. But it wasn't until he stepped into the shoes of Artemus Gordon, the sharp-witted, shape-shifting sidekick, that everything changed. Born in Poland in 1920 and raised in New York, Ross Martin wasn't your typical Hollywood star. He spoke multiple languages fluently: Polish, Russian, Yiddish, Italian, French, and German, and had a background in classical music, literature, and law. He didn't crash into fame with brute force or headline scandals. Instead, he studied it, crafted it, earned it. His acting was precise, calculated, and deeply intelligent. And when CBS cast him opposite Robert Conrad in 1965, they knew they weren't just hiring another face. They were creating a force. As Artemus Gordon, Martin transformed each episode. He was a chameleon, often playing 3 or more characters per show in elaborate disguises, accents, and personas. Unlike most TV sidekicks of the era, who were either comic relief or silent muscle, Martin's Gordon was the brains of the operation. The gadgets, the science, the cons. All his, and audiences loved it. Critics even compared his work to Peter Sellers for the sheer range and creativity he brought to every scene. But his brilliance wasn't just in the acting. Behind the camera, Martin helped shape how Gordon operated, pushing for more elaborate personas and trickery, wanting each disguise to feel like a mini performance within the story. He brought his real-life talents, language, movement, musical skill, into the role, blurring the line between character and actor. The result? A sidekick who often stole the spotlight. By the show's 3rd season, Martin was at the height of his popularity. He was nominated for an Emmy in 1969 for his work on the show, a rare nod for a genre series at the time. But the fame came with pressure. The show's punishing pace and demanding physicality, especially the elaborate fight scenes, took a toll, and as he poured more of himself into the role, Martin started to feel the cracks forming behind the scenes. There were whispers even then that he was overworked, that the show's schedule was too grueling, that something wasn't quite right. But to fans watching at home, it all looked effortless. Gordon was the brilliant backbone of the series, clever, calm, unshakable. No one could have guessed that just behind that calm exterior, Martin was walking straight into a storm, not just in his health, but in the show's direction and its future. Because while Artemus Gordon may have been untouchable on screen, Ross Martin was about to face something no disguise could protect him from. The fall came fast, and no one saw it coming. In 1968, during the peak of the Wild Wild West success, Ross Martin suffered a sudden, devastating health crisis that would change the course of his life and shake the entire production to its core. At first, it was just a broken leg. While shooting a physically demanding scene, something the show was famous for, Martin took a misstep that left him injured and temporarily sidelined. The production paused, fans were told it was minor, and the studio reassured everyone that he'd be back soon. But what happened next blindsided everyone. Not long after his leg began to heal, Martin suffered a massive heart attack. This wasn't just a medical scare, it was a full-stop emergency. At just 48 years old, he found himself fighting for his life. The energetic, quick-witted genius who had dazzled audiences with his endless disguises was now confined to a hospital bed, his future uncertain. Production on the Wild Wild West ground to a halt once again. Behind the scenes, panic set in. The show depended on Martin, not just as a performer, but as a balance to Robert Conrad's physical, action-heavy style. Without him, the series lost its rhythm. Guest stars were brought in to fill the void, but none could replicate what Martin had brought to the role. His chemistry with Conrad was lightning in a bottle. Without him, the show limped forward, but the magic wasn't the same. While Martin quietly recovered, the studio scrambled. They couldn't cancel the show yet, not with strong ratings and a loyal fan base, but they knew something had shifted. Martin's absence exposed just how fragile the foundation really was. And yet, through all of it, Ross Martin stayed silent. He didn't make public statements or blame anyone. He didn't talk about the pressure, the brutal shooting schedule, or the physical toll it had taken. Instead, he focused on healing. And when he eventually returned to set, thinner and slower but still sharp as ever, he simply slipped back into Gordon's shoes like nothing had happened. But the damage had already been done. The health scare wasn't just a personal crisis. It was a wake-up call. It showed how vulnerable the production really was. It proved that the show's high-octane, physically demanding formula wasn't sustainable. And it marked the beginning of a quiet unraveling behind the scenes. Martin, once the show's quiet anchor, had become a symbol of everything the network was beginning to fear. Rising costs, injury risks, and the real human toll of pushing too hard. Fans had no idea. All they saw was a comeback, the brilliant disguises, the same clever charm. But behind those performances was a man recovering from something far more serious than anyone realized. And just when things seemed to be settling down, the real drama began. Even before Ross Martin's heart attack, there were rumblings that all wasn't well behind the scenes of the Wild Wild West. After the crisis, though, those whispers grew louder and darker. The chemistry between Robert Conrad and Ross Martin on screen was undeniable. Conrad was a brash, confident action star. Martin was a cerebral, quick-witted mastermind. Together, they made the perfect duo. But off-camera, their dynamic wasn't always so smooth. While never outright hostile, there were moments when tensions bubbled beneath the surface. Conrad, known for doing his own stunts and being fiercely competitive, often pushed production to its physical limits. Martin, meanwhile, was more reserved and calculated, less about showmanship, more about precision. There were rumors, though never confirmed, that the two occasionally clashed on set, not in screaming matches, but in subtle power shifts. Conrad had more sway with the network and wasn't shy about using it. Martin, despite his immense talent, was seen as more replaceable. Some in the production circle reportedly viewed him as too intellectual or too theatrical for the show's brawny brand of Western adventure. Adding to the friction were growing complaints from crew and cast about the pressure cooker environment on set. Long hours, dangerous stunts, last-minute rewrites. The weekly demand for elaborate disguises and fast-paced action sequences made the show one of the most grueling productions on television at the time. And after Martin's health scare, the mood changed. There was no longer a sense that everyone was invincible. Behind closed doors, studio executives began talking about scaling back. Budgets were questioned. The show's tone was scrutinized. And the constant need to one-up previous episodes with more elaborate action, something both Martin and Conrad were starting to physically pay for, became a point of internal debate. Some say Martin felt the pressure more than anyone. He wasn't just an actor, he was an artist. When producers wanted him to play a character in a fake mustache and foreign accent, he'd throw himself into studying the dialect, building the mannerisms, and making each disguise feel believable. But the grind was wearing him down. After the heart attack, those closest to him noticed a shift. He was still dedicated, still brilliant, but more cautious, and, some say, more frustrated. Then there were the rumors of script disputes. Word spread that Martin occasionally pushed back against scenes he felt were over the top or inconsistent with Artemus Gordon's character. He wasn't being difficult. He just cared. But on a fast-paced network show, caring too much wasn't always welcomed. Yet through it all, Martin never publicly spoke about these tensions. Not yet. What's clear, though, is that by 1969, the show's behind-the-scenes vibe had changed. What started as a fun, stylish experiment had morphed into a tense, unpredictable machine, and Ross Martin, once its quiet MVP, was caught in the middle. And just as things were nearing a boiling point, the network made a decision that shocked everyone. The cancellation of the Wild Wild West wasn't just surprising. It was suspicious. By 1969, the show was still pulling strong ratings, and fans were deeply invested in the eccentric world of secret agents, steampunk gadgets, and outlandish villains. On paper, the series was a hit. But almost overnight, CBS pulled the plug. No farewell episode. No proper ending. Just gone. And for years, no one really knew why. Publicly, CBS claimed it was shifting direction, moving away from violent content and excessive action in response to mounting political pressure. But insiders knew that wasn't the full story. Throughout the late 60s, the network was under fire, not from viewers, but from Washington. The government had started targeting TV shows with high levels of violence, claiming they were contributing to growing unrest among American youth. Politicians and watchdog groups began singling out specific programs, the Wild Wild West included, as being too graphic for prime time. The problem? It was the very violence that gave the show its signature energy. Every episode included fistfights, shootouts, explosions, and elaborate death traps. While most of it was tongue-in-cheek and clearly stylized, the show was an easy target for a public relations crackdown. And CBS didn't want to fight the heat. They quietly began reviewing their most problematic titles, and Wild Wild West landed right at the top of the list. Behind the scenes, there were other motives too. The production had become expensive. The stunts, costumes, and sets were elaborate. And then there was the issue of Ross Martin's health and Robert Conrad's increasing insistence on performing dangerous action sequences himself. Insurance costs were rising. Injuries were becoming too frequent. From a business perspective, the show was becoming a liability. Ross Martin, who had just returned from his heart attack and was still adjusting to the intense workload, was blindsided after everything he had poured into the character. The disguises, the research, the creativity. He wasn't given a chance to say goodbye to the role. Conrad was equally stunned, later calling the cancellation betrayal. But neither had the platform to push back. Years later, Martin finally addressed cancellation in an interview. His words were calm but cutting. He said the network's concern over violence was convenient and hinted that politics, not public safety, had killed the show. He never raised his voice, never named names. But the subtext was clear. The decision wasn't just about content. It was about control. What really stung was that the fans never got closure. No explanation. No final episode to wrap up Gordon and West's story. Just a sudden vanishing act that left a hole in the hearts of viewers and creators alike. And yet, even after all that, after the cancellation, the silence, and the mounting frustrations, Ross Martin didn't disappear. In fact, what happened next proved just how committed he was to the legacy he'd helped build. Most actors would have quietly stepped away after what Ross Martin endured. Crippling health scares, a canceled hit show, and a network that offered no real closure. But Martin wasn't like most actors. Instead of fading into the background, he staged a quiet, powerful comeback. One that few people saw coming, and even fewer fully understood. After the Wild Wild West was abruptly pulled from the air, Martin stayed mostly out of the spotlight. He did guest roles on various shows, but nothing long-term. Still, for loyal fans, he remained Artemus Gordon, the clever, sharp-eyed illusionist who could outsmart anyone in the room. And CBS, despite burying the show, couldn't ignore the demand that never really went away. Then came 1979, 10 years after the show was canceled, when CBS suddenly announced a Wild Wild West reunion movie. It was a gamble. Network executives weren't sure the chemistry between Martin and Robert Conrad could still carry the screen. But when the cameras rolled again, it was like no time had passed. Martin slipped right back into Gordon's skin, with every disguise, every accent, every sly smirk fully intact. Fans were stunned, not just because he looked and sounded like the Artemus they remembered, but because of how effortlessly he moved through scenes. After everything, his heart attack, the stress, the years away, he hadn't lost a step. What most viewers didn't know, though, was how difficult the return really was. Behind the scenes, Martin had privately worried he wouldn't be able to keep up. He was in his late 50s, and the pressure of doing stunts and elaborate character work again was real. His wife later revealed that he agonized over whether he'd live up to fans' expectations. But his commitment never wavered. He spent hours rehearsing accents, working on makeup effects, and shaping Gordon's persona for a new era. The reunion film was a hit, not just with nostalgic fans, but even with younger viewers discovering the duo for the first time. It reignited interest in the series, and CBS greenlit a second reunion movie in 1980. Once again, Martin returned, this time more confident, more comfortable. It was a victory lap he never expected, but fully earned. But perhaps the most surprising moment came in an interview just after the second reunion aired. Ross Martin was asked if he ever felt bitter about how the original series ended, about the way CBS handled his character, the stress of the production, and the silence that followed his health crisis. He paused for a long time before answering, and then he said something no one expected. The show didn't owe me anything. It gave me Gordon, and Gordon gave me the chance to do something no one else was doing. I don't regret any of it. It was classic Ross Martin, measured, humble, and quietly profound. He didn't need revenge or recognition. He just wanted to finish the story. But tragically, that comeback would be his last. Ross Martin had just reminded the world who he was. After a decade of relative quiet, his return as Artemus Gordon in the Wild Wild West reunion movies was more than nostalgic. It was a statement. He proved he still had the magic, the presence, and the skill to own the screen. Fans were thrilled. Critics applauded. And behind it all, Martin was quietly preparing for more. Plans were in motion for a third reunion film. CBS saw the success of the first two and wanted to capitalize. Robert Conrad was on board. And despite his earlier health issues, Ross Martin was enthusiastic. For the first time in years, things felt right again. But then came the moment that no one expected. On July 3rd, 1981, while playing a friendly game of tennis with friends, Ross Martin suddenly collapsed on the court. Just like that. Gone. A second heart attack. This one fatal. He was only 61 years old. The entertainment world was stunned. There was no warning, no indication of a decline. He had seemed vibrant, happy, back in his element. The contrast was brutal. Robert Conrad was one of the first to respond publicly. His voice cracked as he described losing the other half of what made Wild Wild West work. The reunion film that had just reignited their legacy was now an unintentional goodbye. Ross Martin's death hit harder than most because he was just beginning to reclaim what had been taken. After all the effort to bounce back, to overcome illness, rejection, and the industry's short memory, he had finally found his way back to the top, only to be taken before he could enjoy it. But while his life ended suddenly, his legacy was anything but forgotten. Fans and peers remembered Ross Martin as one of the most versatile performers of his era, a master of disguise, dialect, and character work. He redefined what it meant to be a sidekick. Artemus Gordon wasn't just comic relief. He was essential. His brain complemented Wes Braun, and together, they became one of the most iconic duos in TV history. Beyond Wild Wild West, Martin's resume was stacked with diverse, complex roles. He played everything from villains to professors, from detectives to diplomats. He brought the same intensity and intellect to every performance, and he was often praised for elevating even the smallest roles into something memorable. Today, he's rarely mentioned in the same breath as Hollywood's biggest legends. But for those who truly know television history, Ross Martin stands out as a quiet trailblazer. He didn't crave the spotlight. He didn't seek controversy. He simply worked brilliantly and consistently until the very end. And for those who grew up watching him transform into a different person every week, the magic he created still lingers. Because sometimes the most unforgettable performers are the ones who never try to be unforgettable at all. Ross Martin was never the kind of star who chased headlines. He didn't air dirty laundry in public, didn't gossip about co-stars, and rarely granted personal interviews. That silence, while classy, left behind an air of mystery, one that only deepened after his death. For years, people close to him hinted that there was more to Martin's story than the public ever knew. He was a man of layers, and behind his polished, respectful exterior were secrets he never spoke about. not because he had something to hide, but because he believed privacy was sacred. Still, in the years since his passing, some of those secrets have quietly surfaced, and they add new depth to an already complex legacy. One of the most surprising revelations? Martin almost walked away from the Wild Wild West. Not once, but twice. Former producers later admitted that Martin had grown deeply frustrated with how the show treated his character. Despite being essential to the series, he often felt sidelined in favor of action-heavy scenes that favored Conrad's strengths. Several times, he quietly asked his agent to explore exit strategies. The only reason he stayed? He didn't want to let fans down. He felt a responsibility to finish what he started. Then there was the matter of his accent work. Many assumed Martin had formal training in dialects. In reality, he was entirely self-taught. A Polish immigrant who grew up in New York, Martin had once struggled with English. As a child, he would mimic voices on the radio to better understand the language. That habit turned into a gift, and eventually into one of the most impressive arsenals of vocal impersonation ever seen on TV. But Martin rarely discussed his struggle, preferring to let the work speak for itself. There were also whispers about his relationships in Hollywood. While never the subject of scandal, some say Martin kept a deliberate distance from the Hollywood machine. He turned down major film offers to stay close to his family in Los Angeles. He declined invitations to high-profile parties. Some mistook this for aloofness, but those who knew him understood. Ross Martin was focused on craft, not clout. Even his health problems were kept tightly under wraps. After his first heart attack, doctors warned him that the stress of working on a high-action show could be fatal. Still, Martin returned to Wild Wild West with little complaint. According to friends, he refused to be treated like a fragile man. He believed that the best way to conquer fear was to keep moving. And then there were his journals, dozens of them, filled with sketches, notes, and observations. After his death, his family found them tucked away in boxes. Many were written in code. Others contained ideas for roles he wanted to play, plays he wanted to write, and even thoughts about retiring early to teach drama at a small college. None of it was ever made public. Ross Martin left behind more than a legacy. He left behind a mystery. And that mystery only deepened the years that followed, when strange rumors began to circulate about what really happened behind the scenes of Wild Wild West. In the years after Ross Martin's passing, a cloud of whispers and rumors began to swirl around the Wild Wild West. Rumors that even Martin himself never publicly addressed, but seemed to hover just beneath the surface. One of the most persistent stories involves tensions with the network and the show's producers. Insiders hinted that Martin had discovered something behind the scenes, something that made him uncomfortable enough to reconsider his involvement. Some say he was close to exposing questionable production practices, from budget mismanagement to intense pressure on the cast to perform dangerous stunts without adequate safety measures. The idea of a star quietly pushing back against reckless decisions fits the quiet courage Martin showed throughout his career. There are also rumors that Martin's health struggles were exacerbated by the show's demanding environment. While his heart attack was officially attributed to natural causes, friends and family later suggested that the constant physical strain, grueling schedule, and lack of real support took a deeper toll than anyone admitted. Martin himself reportedly felt betrayed by the industry's refusal to slow down or accommodate him, adding to the emotional weight he carried in silence. Some colleagues recall moments when Martin would speak cryptically about regrets, not about his roles or performances, but about what the show could have been if things were handled differently. He believed the network's focus on flashy action overshadowed the storytelling and character development he felt passionate about. In private conversations, he expressed a wish that Wild Wild West had been given more time to evolve, rather than being rushed to keep up with ratings and political pressures. Perhaps the most chilling whisper involves a rumored draft of a script Martin was working on before his death. This script reportedly included a storyline exposing some of the darkest, most dangerous aspect of the entertainment industry at the time. Details that could have rocked Hollywood. It's unclear whether the script was ever completed or if it was intended as a personal project. The manuscript has never been found. What's undeniable is that Ross Martin's story is more than just a tale of a gifted actor who brought a unique character to life. It's a story of resilience, quiet battles fought behind closed doors, and sacrifices made without fanfare. He never shouted about the challenges. He never demanded the spotlight. Instead, he worked, endured, and created magic in the shadows. His silence might have kept some secrets buried, but also left behind a legacy that continues to intrigue and inspire. So next time you watch The Wild Wild West, remember that behind the disguises and action scenes was a man who gave everything for his craft, who survived storms most never saw, and who finally broke his silence in the only way he knew how, through unforgettable performance.